Next ball game, little Saturday action. I'm talking about Navy at UCF, 11 o'clock Saturday morning. Of course, that's Eastern start time. UCF's minus 16.5, totals 53. And even though the Knights have been real good, they did fail to cover this year against the likes of East Carolina, Georgia Tech, and Louisville. And even though they're one of the best rushing teams in the country, UCF is facing one of the best rush defenses in the nation over at Navy. The midshipmen are giving up just 86 yards a game on the ground. And as always, they run it like a million times a game on offense. They're in the top 10 in the nation in rushing. Now, total-wise, Navy saw unders against the likes of Cincy, Air Force, and East Carolina. Meanwhile, UCF went 67% to the under in their last 9. I'm going to lean toward Navy plus 16.5, under 53. Next matchup, Illinois at Michigan, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. The Michigan Wolverines are minus 17.5, totals 43. And even though the Wolverines do look unbeatable, they're facing one of the tougher defenses in the country. Illinois is allowing only 12 points a game, and they're in the top 3 in fewest yards allowed. Just imagine if they had an offense. Now, the Illini, they're taking on a Michigan team who failed to cover against the likes of Nebraska, Indiana, and Maryland this year. They've also been lackluster with their aerial attack. I guess they really haven't had to pass the ball, but still, Michigan has the 95th ranked passing offense. Now, total-wise, Michigan went 70% to the under in their last 10. Meanwhile, Illinois saw 7 out of their last 10 stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Illinois plus 17.5, keeping this one close, under 43. That feels like a 24-10 game. All right, next matchup, it is going to be TCU Baylor, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff Saturday. TCU's the 2.5-point favorite, totals 56. Now, the undefeated Horned Frogs are covering in 90% of their ball games this season. They're also scoring over 40 points a game, and they rank in the top 15 in total yards. They're facing a Baylor squad who just got destroyed by Kansas State 31-3. They also failed to cover against the likes of West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and BYU. Now, total-wise, 7 out of Baylor's last 10 got over the number. Meanwhile, TCU went 60% to the over in their last 10 themselves. Give me TCU minus 2.5, over 56. Next ball game, Austin Peay taking on Alabama, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. This game's currently off the board. Look for that line to be posted either late Friday or early Saturday. Now, the Alabama Crimson Tide, they lost 2 out of their last 4, and they've had a tough time covering the point spread over the past month or so. They failed to cover in 5 out of their last 6 ball games. They're also facing an Austin Peay squad who got the W in 3 out of their last 4 themselves, and they do score a whole bunch of points. I mean, this isn't a team that's going to be helpless on offense. They can move the ball. The Governors have scored 27 points or more in 8 out of their 10 ball games this season. I also think this spread is going to open up incredibly high. I think Austin Peay can keep it close. I'm going to imagine they're going to be catching like 30 or 40 points here. I'm going to lean toward Austin Peay getting the job done against the number. Next ball game, Louisiana at Florida State, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Florida State's minus 24, totals 51.5. Now, Florida State's on a 3-game winning streak. They've done a real nice job covering the point spread. They're 7-2 against the spread in their last 9, and they've got quite an impressive secondary. The Noles currently have a top 3 passing defense, and they're allowing only 18 points a game. Now, they're facing a Louisiana team who lost 5 out of their last 8, and they've been lackluster on offense this year. These guys are currently 84th in the nation in total yards per game. Now, scoring-wise, 5 out of the Cajuns' last 7 stayed under the number. Not all too shocking there. Meanwhile, Florida State went 60% to the under in their last 10. Can certainly credit that to their tough defense. Give me Florida State minus 24, under 51.5 in the tight window. Next ball game, East Tennessee State taking on Mississippi State. And that'll be a noontime Eastern kickoff. That game is currently off the board. Now, the Bulldogs could possibly gain over 500 yards of total offense in this one. And even though they've hit a bit of a rough patch here recently, the Bulldogs have covered this year against the likes of Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Bowling Green. They're facing an East Tennessee State team who lost their last 4 games, and they've really had problems on defense this year. Not sure what this number will be, really don't care. I'm going to lean toward Mississippi State getting the job done against the spread. Next ball game, UMass, Texas A&M, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. The Texas A&M Aggies are minus 33, totals 48. Now, I'll tell you what, it is possible that the Aggies struggle on offense Saturday. They're scoring only 21 points a game this year, and they're 96th in the nation in total yards. They're facing a UMass team who actually has one of the better secondaries in college football, believe it or not. These guys are allowing only 184 yards a game through the air. They rank in the top 20 in pass defense. Now, the Minutemen have also covered against the likes of Arkansas State, Liberty, and Eastern Michigan. When it comes to the number, UMass went 70% to the under in their last 10. Meanwhile, Texas A&M went 7-3 to the under in their last 10 themselves. I think UMass should be able to keep it within 34 points. Give me UMass plus 33, under 48. Next ball game, little SEC action. Florida Gators at Vanderbilt, 12 o'clock East. Florida's minus 14.5, totals 57 and a hook. Now, the Gators might run for about 300 yards on Saturday. They've got a top 15 rushing attack, and they're facing one of the worst defensive units in the country. Vandy's allowing over 35 points a game, and they're in the bottom 10 in total yards allowed. Now, when it comes to scoring, Vandy's D may let this one get over the number on their own. The Commodores are also 60% to the over on the season. Meanwhile, Florida saw 6 out of their last 10 get over the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Florida minus 14.5, over 57 and a hook. Next ball game, it is going to be UConn Army, 12 o'clock East. Army is the 10-point favorite at home, totals 43. And even though the Black Knights are the double-digit favorite, they lost 6 out of their last 9, and they do a terrible job slowing down the run. They're giving up just about 200 yards a game on the ground. They're also facing a UConn team who loves to pound the football. These guys are grinding out a $190 a game on the ground. The Huskies also got the W in 5 out of their last 6, and that includes a 36-33 victory over Liberty last week. Now, total-wise, UConn's 5-1 of the under in their last 6. Army saw 4 out of their last 6 stay under the total themselves. Give me UConn plus 10, keeping this one close, under 43. And speaking of Liberty, we got our next game, Virginia Tech at Liberty, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. The Liberty Flames are minus 9.5, totals 46. And even though the Flames are coming fresh off that shocking loss to UConn, they are still one of the better defensive teams in the nation. They're allowing just 22 points a game, and they're in the top 30 in fewest yards allowed. Now, they're squaring off against one of the worst offensive units in the country. The Virginia Tech Hokies are scoring just 18 points a game, and they rank 119th in total yards. And, of course, that's out of 131 qualifying ball clubs. So, once again, 119th in total yards. Now, VTech's 70% to the under this year. No real shocker there. Liberty saw 3 out of their last 4 stay under the line. Give me Liberty minus 9.5, under 46. Next ball game, Wisconsin, Nebraska, 12 o'clock East. The Badgers are 13.5, totals 41. Now, I actually don't think the Badgers are good enough to lay this many points. They're coming fresh off a double-digit loss to Iowa, who pretty much couldn't score against a high school team. And when it comes to throwing the football, well, Wisconsin doesn't do that well either. They're 105th in the league in the nation in passing. They're facing a Nebraska team who does have covers this year against the likes of Michigan, Minnesota, and Purdue. And when it comes to defensive play, the Huskers held their opponents to 21 points or less in 4 out of their last 6. So these guys aren't completely helpless. Now, total-wise, Nebraska went 70% to the under in their last 10. Wisconsin saw unders against the likes of Iowa, Maryland, and Washington State. Give me Nebraska plus 13.5, keeping this one close, under 41. Next ball game, Northwestern at Purdue, 12 o'clock East. Purdue's minus 19, totals 48. And of course, Aiden O'Connell and the Boilermakers, they really like to sling it. They've got a top 20 passing offense. And wide receiver Charlie Jones, he's been exceptional. They're facing a one-win Northwestern team who allows over 28 points per contest themselves. Meanwhile, on the offensive side of the football, well, these guys are pitiful at moving the chains. They're 101st in total yards, and they're averaging only 15 points per contest. Now, total-wise, Purdue could potentially put this one over the number themselves. They're already 70% to the over in their last 10. Meanwhile, Northwestern saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Purdue minus 19, over 48. Next contest, Indiana at Michigan State, 12 o'clock East. Sparty's minus 11, totals 47. Now, in my opinion, this number is way too high for Sparty. They failed to cover in 6 out of their last 8. And they've got a porous secondary. These guys are 106th in the country in defending the pass. Meanwhile, offensively, Michigan State has one of the worst rushing attacks in the Big Ten. Of course, that's a stark contrast from the Kenneth Walker days last season. Now they're facing an Indiana team on the other side who, make no mistake, they're a really bad football team. I'm not going to deny that. But just keep in mind, they did cover the number this year against the likes of Maryland, Michigan, and Illinois. So they can cover the number in conference play. Now, 6 out of the Hoosiers' last 9 got over the line. That's thanks to that bad defense. Meanwhile, Michigan State saw overs against the likes of Rutgers, Wisconsin, and Ohio State. Give me Indiana plus 11, over 47. Next ball game, ACC action, Duke, Pitt, 12 o'clock East. The Pitt Panthers are minus 7.5, totals 53 and a hook. And I'll tell you what, much different from last year, the Pitt Panthers haven't thrown the ball all that great this season. They're 82nd in passing yards. They're also facing a Duke squad who's on a 3-game winning streak and also got the W in 7 out of their last 10. This Blue Devil offense is scoring 34 points a game, and they rank in the top 25 in rushing yards. Now, Pitt went 70% to the over in their last 10. Duke saw 5 out of their last 8 get over the number themselves. Give me Duke plus 7.5, keeping this one close, over 53 and a hook. Next ball game, Texas San Antonio at Rice, 1 o'clock East. UTSA's minus 14, total 60. And I'll tell you what, if this Roadrunner offense is clicking, they could score about 1 million points in this one. UTSA's already in the top 10 in the nation in total yards. They're also facing a really bad Rice defense who gives up nearly 35 points a game. Now, Rice went 80% to the over in their last 10. No real surprise there. Meanwhile, UTSA saw 6 out of their last 10 get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Texas San Antonio minus 14, over 60. Next matchup, little Big 12 action. I'm talking about Kansas State at West Virginia, 2 o'clock Eastern start time. K-State's minus 7, totals 54.5. And even though K-State just demolished Baylor, well, you got to keep in mind, Morgantown is always a tough place to play. The Mountaineers still have a winning record at home this year, and they're coming off a nice win over Oklahoma this past Saturday. This Mountaineer D, they're going to have to really exploit this one-dimensional Kansas State offense. The Wildcats are 104th in the nation in passing yards per contest. All they're going to do is run it. They're just going to continue to pound it. You got to exploit that, throw a lot of guys in the box. Now, K-State went 60% to the under in their last 10. West Virginia saw 5 out of their last 7 stay under the total themselves. Give me West Virginia plus 7, under 54.5. Next ball game, Washington State at Arizona, 2 o'clock Eastern start time. Wazoo's minus 3, total 63. Now, the Cougs covered in their last 3 straight, 7-2 against the spread in their last 9. They've also played some really good defense for, the most part this year. They're in the top 20 right now in the entire country in fewest points allowed on D. They're facing an Arizona program who lost 4 out of their last 5. And they gave up 45 points or more in all but one of those contests I just mentioned. And no real surprise here, guys. This Wildcat D is in the bottom 5 in the country in total yards allowed. Now, scoring-wise, Arizona went 60% to the over in their last 10. Wazoo saw overs against the likes of Stanford, Oregon. I'm going to lean toward Washington State -3 over 63. Next ball game, Houston, East Carolina, 2 o'clock East. ECU's -6.5, total 66. Now, East Carolina's done a nice job covering the number. The Pirates are 7-3 against the spread in their last 10. They have also one of the best aerial attacks in the AAC. These guys have a top 20 passing offense in the entire country. They're facing a Houston club who has one of the worst pass defenses in the nation. These guys are in the bottom 3 in defending the pass. And when it comes to covering the number, these guys failed to cover in 7 out of their last 10. Now, total-wise, Houston went 90% to the over in their last 10 outings. Meanwhile, ECU saw overs against the likes of Cincinnati, Memphis, and USF. Give me ECU -6.5 over 66. Next game, North Alabama taking on Memphis, 2 o'clock Eastern start time. Game's currently off the board. Now, the 1-win North Alabama Lions, well, they simply can't play defense. These guys are giving up 39 points a game in their last 9 outings, and of course, that's playing, Division I FCS schools and probably D2 schools in there as well. Now, Memphis has done a nice job offensively this year themselves, and they've beaten the likes of Tulsa, North Texas, and Navy. Give me Memphis getting the job done against the spread. Next matchup, Georgia State, JMU, 2 o'clock East. James Madison's -8.5, totals 53. Now, the JMU Dukes went 7-3 against the spread in their last 10. They also have one of the best rush defenses in the game. These guys are allowing only 78 yards a game on the ground. They're facing a Georgia State team who's no threat to pass the ball, so they're going to have to run it into this great rush defense of JMU. Now, the Georgia State Panthers also play some pretty soft defense. They're 103rd in the nation in total points allowed. Now, scoring-wise, Georgia State saw overs against the likes of Southern Miss, Georgia Southern, and Coastal Carolina. Meanwhile, James Madison saw 5 out of their last 8 get over the total themselves. Give me JMU -8.5 over 53. Next ball game, Oregon State at Arizona State, 2:15 Eastern start time. Oregon State's -7, totals 54.5. Now, the Oregon State Beavers are one of the best covering teams in the country. They're 8-2 against the spread in their last 10. They also do a nice job of running the football. These guys are gaining nearly 200 yards a game on the ground. They're facing a Sun Devil D who's got the 98th ranked rush defense. They're also allowing 31 points a game. Now, total-wise, 4 out of the Sun Devils' last 6 did get over the number. Oregon State went 60% to the over in their last 10. Give me Oregon State -7 over 54.5. Next matchup, Boston College at Notre Dame, 2:30 p.m. East. Notre Dame's -20.5, totals 45. Now, the Irish won their last 4 straight, 7-1 straight up in their last 8. Notre Dame's got a real solid secondary. These guys are limiting their competition to just 193 yards a game passing. They're facing a BC offense who's little threat moving the sticks themselves. They're scoring only 19 points per contest, and they're dead last in college football in running the ball. Now, total-wise, 3 out of BC's last 5 stayed under the line. Notre Dame saw unders versus the likes of Stanford, BYU, and Cal. This feels like a 31-3 game to me. Give me Notre Dame -20.5, under 45. And with that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final matchup for Part 1. It is going to be Old Dominion at Appalachian State, 2:30 p.m. East. Appalachian State's minus 15.5, totals 51. And even though Appy's had a tough time covering the number this year, I do think they outclassed the Monarchs in this one. Appy scoring just about 35 points a game, and they've run the football very efficiently. They're facing an ODU rush defense who's one of the worst in the country. And these guys are allowing just under 200 yards a game on the ground. They're also 116th in total yards allowed. Now, when it comes to scoring, ODU did see their last 4 straight stay under the total, 70% to the under in their last 10. Meanwhile, Appalachian State saw 3 out of their last 4 stay under the total themselves. Give me Appy State minus 15.5, under 51. And with that, guys, now it's time for our quick pick recap. I like Toledo minus 15.5, under 50 and a hook. Ohio minus 3, over 54. Eastern Michigan plus 8, over 61. Northern Illinois minus 1.5, under 45.5 points. Western Michigan plus 10, under 49. Tulane minus 3, over 65. Tulsa minus 12.5, over 59. New Mexico plus 14, under 39.5. Navy plus 16.5, under 53. Illinois plus 17.5, under 43. TCU minus 2.5, over 56. Give me Austin Peay getting the job done against the spread. Florida State minus 24, under 51.5. Mississippi State getting the job done against the number. UMass plus 33, under 48. Florida Gators minus 14.5, over 57 and a hook. UConn plus 10, under 43. Liberty minus 9.5, under 46. Nebraska plus 13.5, under 41. Purdue minus 19, over 48. Indiana plus 11, over 47. Duke plus 7.5, over 53 and a hook. UTSA minus 14, over 60. West Virginia plus 7, under 54.5. Washington State minus 3, over 63. East Carolina minus 6.5, over 66. Give me Memphis getting the job done against the spread. James Madison minus 8.5, over 53. Oregon State minus 7, over 54.5. Notre Dame minus 20 and a hook, under 45. With my next and final free pick for the video, I'm going to lean toward Appalachian State minus 15.5, under 51.